the Lebenspraxis podcast with Josef Bartz, exploring a life of connection and depth. All right, welcome to another episode of the Lebenspraxis podcast. And today I'm here with David Grey. David, we met some years ago, and I tell the story about how it came to be that there's this podcast episode now together in a moment. But I knew that we met. I didn't know at which workshop, but I found out because I listened to the episode you did with Soichi.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a side sentence where you said it, because apparently this was your first time at an Ido Portal event. And I felt a little bit bad when I heard this, because did you know that Ido would not be there at the event?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
No.
Because there was these different phases. In the beginning, when I was starting to teach workshops for Ido, that was very often the case that he knew already he wouldn't come, but he wouldn't say it. Then more and more people started to, realize, Ido might not be there. And then they had like a small sentence in the bottom that Ido might be there or might not be there. And for me, it was always a bit of a tricky situation. I was not really in a place of power, so I didn't feel I could do much about it. And I also didn't really understand what's going on. Why are we not telling the people that he will not be there? But I know why he did it, because everyone was so connected with him. Everyone wanted to meet him, but he wanted people to be there for the material. So it put me in a very difficult situation sometimes, because I had also people, taking me after the workshop and asking Josef, okay, let's speak for a moment. Why is Ido not here? And could he not tell us before? And they're always thank you, Josef, for being here. It was very nice and I enjoyed it very much. But it would have been also great if Ido would have been here.
Yeah. I thought it was a great workshop. There's just that initial disappointment that he's not there, because obviously he's the face of the brand and stuff. And I can understand from his point of view, because I probably wouldn't have went if I knew he wasn't going to be there. But then once I did go and once I finished it, I was still really happy that I went. So yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one. And we're running our own workshops now, and I have a similar problem because it's under my name and I have to teach them. But maybe I don't always want to have to teach them. So it's kind of a tricky one. But I would tell people who the instructor was.
That was exactly the question that I wanted to ask. How is it with your workshops now if you run into the similar problem? So okay, you already had this on your mind. Nice. I tell a moment the story of this podcast episode. So I have a student, Simon Maurer, who went to I think he went to a workshop and he did also some coaching, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. I'm not sure if with you directly or with some of your...
with me, a little bit online with me a couple of years ago. And then I think he's done some of our programs on his own. And then he came to our workshop in Munich, which was a couple of months ago, sometime earlier this year.
Okay, yes. And he was very, very excited. He told me directly after, wow, Josef, this was a very, very exciting workshop. I learned so much. And then he did a Zoom session with me and a few others from we are all a small community here, semi-small, let's say, or a community of, the group that is really dedicated. And we sometimes do the Zooms to share things with each other. So he shared a few of these principles, the basic principles that you have to do. And now I introduce who you are, because David is talking about rehabilitation. Yeah. So your company is also called David Grey Rehab.
Mm-hmm.
Oh? Yes. So that's David's main thing, rehabilitation. But I think you have your very own ideas there. as far as I understand from what I saw, what Simon said. And I would say I know very little of it yet. So I would be very interested to know a little bit more. And what I also know, because I said already, okay, you had this episode with Soichi. I know that you have been in Australia for a while, and there you crossed paths with Soichi and spent a little bit of time learning from her, became a student, and then Soichi also went to a workshop of yours. So there was this twist also. But I think one very important part, and tell me if it's correct, is you had some certain injuries or pains, and the things that you did, like the movement approach, like these different things, couldn't really solve it. And then you searched for your way to solve that. That worked, created a system around it, and now you're doing this with people. And if I'm correct, is there are people coming to you with their own problems, but there are also many trainers or maybe physiotherapists also that probably, I would guess, lots of physiotherapists probably, that learn your methods. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So the time I met you, Joseph, I was playing a lot of Gaelic football at the time, which is an Irish sport, and hurling as well, two Irish sports, but mainly Gaelic football. And I was playing at a decent level, and I was very, very serious about it. And I had a lot of knee issues and a lot of Achilles issues. And I just was very frustrated with the state of the rehab and the physiotherapy and some of the training, doctors and all of that kind of health and fitness industry in Ireland. I really struggled to get the help that I needed for various reasons, and not any blame on any one person or anything like that. Everyone was trying their best, but even the industry has moved on quite a bit, even in the last 15 years. I think everyone or most people are a lot better. But yeah, just at the time, there was still a very big reliance on like passive modalities, manual therapy. I got some injections, very like just inside the box, like thinking around movement and just trying to put everyone into the same hole and activating glutes and movements, like things like this that weren't really helping. So I think I just came across Ido and started like probably a lot of people around that time, watch him on YouTube, and at least he was giving a different message. Whether it was right or wrong, he was giving a message which was, you can kind of take control and you can empower yourself and you can train your body in all of these ways and you're not fragile. So, and I think that message still stands true, and it's a really important message. So I flew to Amsterdam for that workshop, met you guys. I was definitely the worst there in terms of, there was a lot of, I think at that workshop, there was a lot of, or probably a lot of the workshops, a lot of coaches as well in the industry. And then some people who are not necessarily coaches or therapists, but were like super deep into movement, really interested. And I was kind of someone that was on the outside. I was just an athlete who was really struggling. So like that was a very humbling experience for me. And I kind of knew I would be, because even in my Gaelic football team, I was the least flexible player. I was relatively fast and strong and stuff, but I couldn't move particularly well. So yeah, I just kind of, that was the start of a cascade of learning for me. And I went to Sydney and trained with Sochi for a while and learned with a lot of great people along the way, and then kind of took what I liked and discarded the rest. And yeah, now it really just started with me trying to help myself, then help some other people. And then we started to create some content online and release programs, and that kind of cascaded into a lot of coaches and therapists buying that stuff and using that stuff, which wasn't intended in the first place, but they tried it on their own bodies, because as you know, probably a lot of coaches and therapists have their own issues. Maybe that's why they're there in the first place. So they tried it on themselves, they felt the results, and then they started to use it with clients. And that's a key point, is that like the work is predictable and repeatable. People can get similar results again and again and again with different types of people, which I think all coaches are looking for that, because anything could work, but we want things that we know will work more often than not. So yeah, I think that's why we're able to run workshops now, because the people have found value in the work, and it's been a fun journey so far.
Nice, David. I have many questions. So, Gaelic football.
Yeah.
What is this?
It's like it's like soccer. It's like a mix of soccer and rugby. So we can catch the ball and we can kick the ball. So yeah, and we can kind of tackle similar to rugby, but not as much. So it's kind of a mix. And then hurling is the other Irish sport, which is we use a stick and a ball. So it's kind of like a mix of hockey and lacrosse.
Oh, okay. Interesting. When you said about you can touch it or you can kick it and you can tackle it, I thought about, do you know Calcio Storico? Have you heard about this?
No.
Is the ancient soccer played in Italy, still in some cities, and they basically have no rules. Like you can do everything. It's crazy. There's some videos on YouTube, some documentaries, and you see it's like, yeah, people are pretty torn up after a game.
Yeah, exactly. Same with our sports, exactly.
Okay. By the way, I love the Irish. Do you say accent or dialect? How do you say?
Yeah,
accent. Yeah, I really love the
Thank you
Irish accent. I would be very interested to know this process of, okay, you have these pains and injuries. You look around. Some things probably help a bit. Some things don't help so much. And now, how did you get to the point where you are now, that you understood that you solved your problems, you solve, the problem of other people? What was the creative process behind the scenes? Can you tell me a little bit about that? That would be very interesting for me.
Yeah, and that's the tricky part, because I'm reading a book at the moment, Stephen King, one of the best writers of our time, and he has an autobiography. Kind of an autobiography. It's a book, and it's just called On Writing. And he said, I took a note. Let me see if I can find the note. It was on the creative act, and it was something to do with ideas, just kind of like, so here's the quote: "Good ideas come literally from nowhere. Two previously unrelated ideas come together and make something new. Your job isn't to find these ideas, it's your job to recognize them." So the reason I took a note of that quote is because some of the like ideas I've had, it seems like they've came from nowhere, but then like the next line says two previously unrelated ideas come together and make something new. So for example, I studied in Sydney, and I did a little bit of like Chinese martial arts, internal martial arts in particular. And I started to notice all of the practitioners and the people that were practicing those type of arts, how one, they're pretty happy in their lives. Two, they're very relaxed. And three, they move really, really well. And a big part of their practice is focusing on moving their bones with much less tension, versus in the strength and conditioning world, it's how much tension can I create. So that was looking back, that was probably a big part of what helped our system develop, because one key principle we have is don't fight tension with tension.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, for example, where you might think about fighting tension with tension in the physiotherapy world, traditionally, if you go in with a tight back, they will give you exercises that will be tightening your core. Like, okay, you have a tight back, you need planks, you need sit-ups, you need crunches, you need all these side planks that will tighten your core. So they're fighting the tension at your back with the tension at your front. And personally, I just think you just end up with tension everywhere when you do that. You just brace at your back and your front. So we have a key principle, which is, if I want to get movement into your back, it doesn't mean that I need a shit ton of tension at the front. I just need to start to move my spine around. If I want to get tension in, or start to move my knee, I don't need to drive it with a huge squeeze and tense. I just need to move my bones. So that is a key principle. Don't fight tension with tension. And that kind of paired then with some really good people that I learned from in the biomechanics world allows hopefully me and others to be able to assess people, to see how they're moving and what ways they're not moving or can't move, and then help them find ways to move that area in their body but with the key point of not trying to just like squeeze or brace or pull myself in as hard as possible. Actually just let the bones move and the muscles will do their job. So that's a key principle. And that's where like two unrelated ideas, for me at least, kind of came together. Then obviously in the rehab space, we have to try and build a lot of strength. If someone has an ACL surgery or anything like that, there's going to be some atrophy on the quads. There's going to be some inhibition. So we're going to need to build strength. And I just have a pretty key principle, which is we want to be strong as we can in all our ranges. So like that's probably something that would have came from Ido's work, I would say. Initially, I think that was a big emphasis there. And then I just, again, linked that a little bit more with the gait cycle, again, the biomechanical view of, okay, so when we're in early stance, when we're in mid stance, when we're in late stance, these are the things that we would like our foot to be able to do. This is what we would like our knee to be able to do. This is what we would like our hip to be able to do. So you can build isolated strength, but you need these patterns to integrate and emerge together to become, to actually, because some people's problems aren't mobility or aren't strength. It's that they just can't access the movement because their nervous system is, for whatever reason, not letting them. So yeah, that would be another previously like unrelated idea, I think. And then I'm just a big fan of like some of the S&C stuff. So like building strength, doing plyometric work, sprinting, change of direction, whatever, just being semi-specific to the sport that someone's trying to get back to or the type of movement that they're trying to get back to. And then, yeah, we have some emphasis on the breathing well. And more so, you'll see like people like Wim Hof in the industry. There's lots of different kind of yoga. There's lots of different factions of focusing on the breath, which I think are all great. But my biggest thing, at least in the beginning, is that the rib cage itself, the thorax, needs to be able to move well. All these joints need to be able to open and close. And that's not really spoken about, I think, in the breathing world. It's more about like breathe into your belly, or it's more about like how long can you hold your breath, or how much can you inhale, how much can you exhale, how long, all of these different types of practices. But I have a big emphasis on making sure your lungs and your thorax can expand in 360 degrees and compress in 360 degrees. And that comes from, yeah, just learning from the martial arts world, learning from some people in the stretching world, and then learning from some kind of biomechanics people as well. And that all kind of pairs back into an overarching principle of let's find what the body is missing and let's give it back. Let's strengthen it. Let's integrate it. And let's do it without always trying to like force it to happen with squeezing and creating as much tension as possible. So hopefully that's a semi-okay answer, but a tricky kind of problem to solve. And a lot of the time, I don't know how this stuff emerged, or at least I would have to sit down and like really write an essay if I wanted to, and I still probably couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, and I can relate to that, David. Like for me, it's also very often that two things connect. This I can very much relate to. Many things that I do is sort of came from, it can come from a sentence I heard someone saying on the bus. And then a few months later, this accumulates into some sort of practice. What you said about the rib cage, let's dive for a moment into that. So this mobilizing the rib cage through the breathing, what would be a person that you give that to? Are that person with specific problems? Is this a general thing that you would do with everyone? Like, to whom would you apply that?
So it's general with everyone in terms of like everyone should be able to hopefully move their ribs and their thorax.
And can you say why?
Because for me, where there's joints, we should have movement. So yeah. I think that's a simple thing for me. And that's easy to see with my hand. I would love to be able to move my hand and pick something up, and people can easily understand that. But then when it comes to something like a spine, it's a little bit harder for some people to see. But for me, that feels obvious. If we have joints, they're there for a reason. Hopefully I can move them. It doesn't mean I have to be a contortionist or do big, huge movements or anything like that, but hopefully I have access to some movement. And another key principle is like for me is yes, we can get stronger locally at each individual tissue and each individual joint, but a body, when you look at the best athletes in the world, and I know some people listening might not be an athlete, but it doesn't matter in terms of like you can still look at these people, Roger Federer, Michael Jordan, Lionel Messi. They look very efficient with their movement. It's if you looked at them in a yoga class, I bet you they would look terrible. They wouldn't be able to get into these big poses. But when they move their body, because they don't have the most flexible hamstrings or the most flexible quads, or they can't necessarily access huge ranges all the time. But when you look at them moving, like they share load across their whole body. Every single thing comes to the party. Mm-hmm. And I think the opposite of that sometimes can be true, which is if you look at maybe a bodybuilder or a powerlifter, they're very good at specific things, but they're very strong in certain areas, and then they really struggle to maybe access other types of movements. So, and that goes for everyone. But sorry, what was the initial question?
The initial question then was who would be the people that where you would say, okay, this is a must, like you have to. Mm-hmm. I would always give this type of person this exercise.
So the ribcage stuff. So I don't think it's a must for anyone, but in general, some people who are very tense, and not just like in their body, but in their lives, in their mind, in how they act, they react to things very, very quickly. Someone steps in front of them in the queue in a shop, and they just like they want to fight them instantly. Breathing, just giving some breathing or some kind of meditative work for that type of person, I think can be good, because they are living in a constant state of probably stress. So just getting them to lie down and relax for a while can be very good. And usually they're the same type of person that will be very tense in their body. They have a tense mind and a tense body. And which came first, I don't know, but we probably need to work on a little bit of both. So just getting them to chill the mind and getting them to move their body. And usually I think both tends to help. That's why people go for a walk in nature. It gets their bones moving, it gets their joints moving, it gets them to relax, it gets them to open their senses, not just like live in the moment in front of them, but open their world up. Their breath, usually their heart rate, kind of things start to just come down a little bit. So for someone that's very tense, first of all, I'll put them up there. They need to work on breathing stuff usually, I think. Even if you think about the pause in the breathing work, we take an inhale and we take an exhale. We take an inhale and actually there should be a pause. We take an exhale and there should be a pause. But these people, they don't pause in their lives at all. Someone does something to them in the car and they jump on the horn. Someone does something to them in the shop and they jump. There's no moment of reflection, the moment of pause, reflection, and then actually now I can act. They just act. They just react to everything. So these people, if you look at them breathing and you ask them to inhale and do a long exhale and take a pause, they can't pause. They have to gasp for air immediately. So the pause is something that's missing, I think, in their lives in general. So that's someone that's like definitely, I think, would benefit in every way from doing that. Other people, if you see someone that maybe really struggles to flex their spine, their thoracic spine in particular, I know a lot of people do thoracic spine flexion drills, and I think they can definitely work. But sometimes my first thing would be to look at actually, can they put air into that area and expand that area back there, and open up all that kind of posterior mediastinum, which is all that space just around the back of the rib cage, let's just say. Then if you have someone that maybe struggles to go into the spinal extension, thoracic spine in particular, and not even just extension, but because we can go into extension, but you can keep your chest quite closed when you do that. So it's more about actually getting expansion through the chest wall. So maybe someone who has very rounded shoulders, and which there's nothing wrong with at all, but they might be maybe losing movement options and not be able to move in a certain way. So I would be trying to get them to maybe open their chest a bit more with the breath. And then if you think about, these are just base level things, but you think about someone who maybe struggles to laterally flex and side bend their spine, maybe that's where like they need to side bend and close one side and breathe and be able to really open up the other side. So those are some simple things. But in general, I think when you start to dive deep into the biomechanics stuff, when you see people with very tight feet and tight ankles and tight hips, like if they have very tight feet and ankles, usually they have very tight hips, and usually they don't move their spine very well, they don't move their shoulders very well. So rather than trying to run around the whole body and stretch each isolated area, which I think a lot of people do, I think if you can not necessarily start, but if you have a focus on mobilizing the middle of the body, getting the ribs and the spine moving really well, I feel like that kind of proximal mobility starts to spread out and opens up the shoulders, the hips, the knees, the ankles as well.
Nice. So, now it sounds like we have a nice principle now to go from the center and
not always, but certainly to be open-minded to that idea, to make sure, like,
of course,
if you have someone that is just so tight through the rib cage, in every breath they take, they're really constricted. I think there's a lot of benefit in opening that up.
And interesting how quickly we got into a more holistic thing that we're talking about, because now if I would now open Instagram and look at your account first, I would think about, okay, this is more centered on, let's say, the physical layer.
Mm-hmm.
But now very quickly you talked about the whole integration of everything and the mental layer, in a sense, the spiritual layer also. That's very interesting for me to hear. And I see why this is maybe not the first thing that you would on your Instagram show or something like this, obviously, because I think you clearly have your niche defined, what you want to talk about, sort of to get people's attention, and from there you can go into deeper things, maybe openly, or maybe just you observe things and you give them things that a client might not even, in a sense, like, no, it's for that.
Exactly. And that's the great model that's really emerging, or it has emerged quite a while ago, but getting more popular in the pain world, is the biopsychosocial model, and understanding like this person as a whole. And funnily enough, a lot of physios use biopsychosocial as a way to basically pretend that the body doesn't exist. It's all about now talking to your clients, communication, building up their confidence, and forgetting about biomechanics or biology. Whereas that frustrates me, because a great way to build confidence with someone, if someone has a sore knee and they feel like they are a sore back, they don't feel comfortable to round their back to pick up a pen. A great way to build confidence is to tell them, look, we know from the research that spinal flexion isn't bad. It's not dangerous. It might not feel amazing for you right now, but if we just gradually expose you to some of these movements, your body will adapt and you're going to be fine. That's a great way to build confidence. Another great way to build confidence is to actually train someone and show them, get them to feel that this doesn't feel bad for you. It feels okay for you. And the best way to build confidence is to do both. Is to explain it to them and prove it to them so they can feel it for themselves. And this is, for me, this is like the merging and actually truly not just talking about biopsychosocial, actually practicing it. And it's a relatively new concept. It's been around quite a while, but also great coaches have been doing this forever, have been speaking to their clients, taking in, looking at, like, thinking about how they're sleeping, how they're eating, how they're thinking, their thoughts, beliefs, and emotions, and goals and fears. They've been training them to be stronger and move better, making sure they're recovering well. It's like, great coaches have been doing this forever. Parents have been doing this forever. Your child falls on the floor and you see them fall and you know it's not a big fall, but they start crying. Usually a lot of parents will go over and say, don't worry, you're okay. You're okay. They don't presume that the child crying means that they've damaged something. But when when a lot of people, a client comes into their office and they tell them, I have a sore back, the presumption, a doctor might presume your back is damaged. That shouldn't be the presumption. The presumption is it doesn't feel, you're getting a specific feedback from your back, but that doesn't mean it's damaged. And the biopsychosocial model is really just what good parents have been doing for a long time, telling their child, one, I'm going to reassure you, you're you're freaking out, you got a fright, but you're okay. Number two, guess what they should do next? They should, if it was playing a game and they fell, they should reassure them that they're okay. And two, show them again. Say, let's get back into it. I don't want to leave it and say, okay, we need to go home and not do this again, because now the child is like associating this game with pain and thinking, I'm not able to do this. So they need to be able to get them back into it again. Let's get them almost forgetting about what just happened and rebuilding confidence again. So good parents have been doing this holistic view forever, and good coaches have. And we've just kind of, in the health and fitness industry, like put a name on it more recently, which is important, but it's not a new concept.
I add a small detail to the parent thing. Do you have kids, David?
No, but so I probably shouldn't speak about it, but I've observed good parents.
Oh yeah. I have two. So I have two kids, and I would add the first thing that you do that is nice to, you don't have, I mean, you can do whatever you want, but as long as it is not creating damage. But the first thing that I and Annika, my girlfriend, do when the kids hurt themselves is ask them how they feel. Ask them how does it feel, and tell them that their feelings and like mirror the feelings and say them, I understand that you feel pain, because they fall down and they have, let's say they hit their hand and they are in pain, and then I would say often something like, wow, that is probably hurting, no? Like, do you feel pain? And because for a child is also the communication, the outside communication of, yeah, I'm in pain. And if you listen to the child, already many things happen. And then the child often calms down very quickly from this acknowledgement of the parent that yes, my father or mother realizes that I'm in pain. All right. And maybe in the work with clients, we could think, how is that also going there? That to take, because that's basically taking the feeling of the child seriously. And in that sense, also taking the feelings of the client seriously, while, like you said, not putting the client in a box, like saying, okay, he says he has back pain, or she, so he must have a disc hernia or something like that. But that it can be whatever reason, but he feels that's true. It's true that the person feels pain.
Yeah, exactly. So that's couldn't be more perfect what you said. So, and I definitely skipped that there. So starting, it should be number one is actually listening and having empathy. And then number two is probably building confidence or reassuring them, or educating them a little bit in a empathetic way, not in a, I'm telling you it's this way. So perfect. Exactly. I love that.
And David, you are doing work online and offline, and offline is in Dublin. Am I correct?
In Waterford. So we're about 2 hours south of Dublin.
Okay. This is a place I never heard of, unfortunately, but
it's unfortunate for us too in some ways, because it's really nice here, but the biggest problem is we don't have an airport. So we actually have a client over here at the moment from Switzerland who has flown in. He's a runner. He's come over to us probably 4 times in the last 18 months or 2 years for like a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks of training at a time. We initially started with online. He had a foot problem, sesamoid problem. He hadn't run for about 18 months, and we cleaned that up online. And then he wanted to get over and come into more just training stuff. Like, okay, this happens quite a bit. Like we kind of rehab an issue and then they realize that now they're actually performing a bit better than they were even before they were injured, and they want to keep going down that rabbit hole. So yeah, the biggest issue with this is he has to fly into Dublin and then get a train down or hire a car or something like that. So, and also we're doing a lot of traveling for our workshops. So the lack of an airport in our city is a big issue for me right now.
I see. How big is this city?
It's like the fifth or sixth biggest city in Ireland, and Ireland is not a big place, so not that big.
Okay.
I don't know how many people, but not that big.
Okay. All right. Okay. But you have a clinic there, so local people come in, or it's more people traveling from international places?
A little bit of both. We haven't been taking on new clients really for a couple of years now because we've been full up. So we have some local people, but they're more like pretty good athletes around the country who are really struggling to get help elsewhere, or somehow they like weasel their way in, and I'll end up taking them on. And then we have some online clients, like some basketballers or soccer players and rugby players around the world. And also sometimes we do have a little space to take someone on, and that's more of a the timing is right. Someone said, I have a hip problem and I want to be able to just walk better or go for a run or whatever on the weekend, and we'll do a little bit of work. But yeah, that's why we created some of our kind of DIY programs to help people be able to help themselves without needing to talk to me all the time.
Yeah. Where you have a few, like you have something for the foot. You have something for the lower body, for the core, for the upper body.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And these programs are for normal people also to fix their problems.
Yeah, they're just for anyone. We've had our lower body one was our first one. It's probably the reason I'm speaking to you now, because we released that, I think, around May 2020. So around the start of COVID, and I just wrote it. I sat down on the couch when it actually took me about 20 minutes to write the program, and I just basically wrote what I would love all my clients, like hip and pelvis, groin, hamstring, quad, knee, calf clients, all this kind of lower body stuff to be able to do. Not being super specific to each issue, just being like, okay, you have a knee, I'd love it to be able to move in these ways. You have a hip, you have a pelvis, I'd love it to be able to move. You need to be able to be strong in these ways. And yeah, the reason I'm talking to you is probably because that program did so well, and eventually now about 20,000 people have done it, and it's been used in every major sport in the world. And yeah, so actually 20,000 people have bought it, but I think maybe like hundreds of thousands of people have done it. Unfortunately for me.
Can be also that just 1,000 people did it, and the other ones just like to buy things,
Exactly.
Sometimes that's a bit the issue with the online programs. No, like I have sometimes I have just a few online things. I have this what I call SROMP, basically joint mobility, so circles and lines and in each joint, and then combining that. And this is one very important pillar of my work, which I basically do with almost everyone that comes in. And I sometimes have people that bought this as an online course, and after a while they book coaching. Yeah, because they realize it's hard for them to do that. There's a certain type of people, no? There's people that can do that on their own. They buy this DIY program, and and they come out on the other side as, I did it, perfect, works. And there are other people, they need an accountability partner, or they need someone to look after them and so on. And for them, they're much more, let's say, interactive people, which I would say, in a sense, everyone is usually benefiting, from accountability. But obviously, as a coach, you have a very limited amount of time that you can coach people. So this DIY programs, I also find always very helpful, and they're usually a good start, into something. So if people want to know more about your stuff, probably they first look at they see you on Instagram, because I think that's your that's like the go-to. You also have the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
The podcast, it seems for me, it's a little bit more for people that are already in the thing, but I might be mistaken. Yeah. So
it's more, I go a bit more higher level on the podcast.
Yeah. Because what I listened to, I also felt like, wow, I need to really concentrate now to stay.
And that's the tricky thing with the podcast is I definitely am talking to coaches and therapists there. But you probably know yourself, especially with solo episodes, a conversation like this is great because I can judge your feedback and your reactions and stuff. And I know how fast, hopefully I know roughly how fast to speak and how slow. But on a solo podcast, I just have a topic and I just go, and I don't know, I can't see anyone nodding along. So when I finished doing a solo podcast talking about whatever I talked about, I did one release. There's one releasing today talking about contrast training, French contrast training in rehab, which is like pairing 4 exercises. So doing like something heavy, then something fast, then something kind of heavy, and then something pretty fast, for example. And I just spoke about my thoughts on that. And I finished the podcast and I walk away and I literally don't know if one person will understand anything or benefit in any way. But,
I know what you mean. I know what you mean with this content creation. I have the same thing that I sometimes feel like sort of I'm here talking, I don't see anyone. That's why I often like to do podcast episodes also with Mariana, who is my right hand or my left hand, because we're both left-handed. I like to say my left hand. Yeah. So I like to do lots of stuff with her together, although it's sort of not necessarily always needed. I might know everything that I want to say, but it's still good to sort of have a sparring partner in the room and someone that can, that can get feedback and raise a little bit the eyebrow if you say something that makes no sense at all.
Can I ask a question, Joseph, around your joint mobility, that kind of program that you have? Can you explain a little bit around the concepts or how that works? So I know you're saying like circles and lines, but I know you think a lot deeper.
I would say, so if for the listeners, I realized if someone knows the approach, the neuroathletic approach, I realized, actually they do the same thing. So what I do there is education about how the joints function, how you can move them. And first we start in a very isolated way, like, okay, I move the head side to side, these things, different lines, also diagonals, and then different rotations, different combinations of it. And first learning to like make decisions about what moves and what moves not. And this I also took from the time I spent with Ido, where we also did a lot of this joint rotations and stuff. I would say we skipped many basic things because Ido he always said, okay, this thing people already did 5 times when they walked to the gym at the street. But I actually then decided, okay, but I want to have all these very basic things because when I did it with people, I realized people said, wow, I feel so different now after. And also I realized the same thing for me. Like when I do in my morning routine, I usually do this stuff. Yeah. And basic things with my head that I did a long time, like for many years I do this, but I still feel it has a very positive effect.
Yes.
On me. So there is this connection of moving the joints, keeping the joints mobile, healthy, that there is metabolism in the joint happening, but also this mind-body connection, this connection of the nervous system, this checking, this how do I feel today in the joints? First, more isolated way, but then it can also lead to more improvisation, actually. Like first integrating, like moving one thing here, moving one thing there, and also in this also a thing that I took from Ido, like talking about open kinetic chain and closed kinetic chain. And then the closed kinetic chain, let's say when my hand is stuck and then I want to move in the in the wrist, and then I will move in the wrist and the elbow and here together, but this will stay and another point will stay, and how do I move in between and do circular motions? Yeah, that then you learn how to integrate the joints together, how do they move together nicely, and then hopefully this ends up for people being able to use that freely, playing with that or doing whatever singular moves they want, but having this good map of their body and knowing, if I feel like this, then it helps me to do this and that. And I had some interesting things that people said. Like one guy had that he was doing different things with the head, different head movements, and he said, "Wow, this is like a 30-minute meditation session." But after a few minutes, he get this mind like does this like the oceanic thing, yeah, where you're like seeing the ocean in front of you just through moving the head. Yeah, that's Trump.
That's great. I love that. I love what you said about the basic head movements, like looking left and right. You might do it throughout the day, but when your intention flips to, this is what the internal martial artists do, where I had Craig Mallet on my podcast, and I actually think it was a really, really good podcast because I and others don't understand it well enough what some of what they do. So they have two things. The difference between external and internal martial arts is, I don't want to butcher this now, but one is like I'm focusing on the movement itself, and the second one is once I can really do the movement really well, I can focus on the sensations within my body a little bit better. Mm-hmm. So the movement is more automatic, and now I can really tune in. And I'm sure there's a line like where there's a little bit of both happening, and a lot of people, yes, they're moving their neck some ways throughout the day, but when you're not worried about, when the intention switches from I need to look at that car to I need to turn my head and only focusing on turning my head, I get a lot different sensations back from my body. Because when I live my life, I can't, if I'm going for a walk and I'm trying to get across the road, my brain just can't focus on all of these sensations. There's way too much going on. So the intention usually throughout the day is coming through my eyes and my hands. I'm looking, I want to look and fix my gaze on a certain part. I need to pick up this pen. I'm not thinking about when I'm picking up the pen, I'm not thinking about I need to extend my elbow and flex my wrist and grasp the pen and blah, 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 blah. I'm literally just fixing my gaze. My intention is fixed on the pen and I pick up the pen. But if I do a picking up the pen motion and I focus on how my elbow feels and is moving in space, I get a lot different sensation and feedback coming back from that area, and potentially the chance to change how that area feels and moves a little bit better when we do that. So I think I love the joint movements, the more isolated, more integrated, even if we're moving our joints, even for people who are moving their joints a lot, because when they flip their intention, you can get very different results.
And it's interesting, the play in between these things that you mentioned, because I remember when you were talking with Soichi in this podcast, you were also talking about this. There was this thing, I think Soichi said it. Someone has shoulder problems, and then she said, okay, I asked him, can you mix a drink for me? And then he moves the arm and moves the shoulder, and in this movement it's okay. And there is this, how do I say, like dichotomy? I don't know if that's the right word. Like there is now a thing of, okay, do I do such tasks that shift the focus in a sense outside, that is like with this movement I'm trying to achieve an outside thing, like I mix the drink.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then on the other side, we have this focusing on the movement, and the movement in a sense is not to achieve a change of the outside. It's not to locomote somewhere in that sense. It's not to manipulate the space, but it's an internal loop that is happening. And there's something with both of them, no? Like I think you said also in this podcast, both of you were agreeing, like okay, that's also very interesting that if someone has pain but suddenly they need to do a certain thing, they don't feel the pain.
Exactly. Yeah. So especially with pain, this is important to understand for people, because a lot of people with pain will be so internalized. All they think about all of the time is, how does my knee feel when I walk down the stairs? How does my knee feel when I stand up off the toilet? They're not they're not thinking about the task. Even when I had really bad knee pain, I found myself even playing in big games, very big games, like biggest game of our season in Gaelic football. And it was so hard for me to really get in the zone because my knee pain was so intense that it was always pulling me back there. And this is an important concept in rehab as well, because when we start to increase speed of movement, we need to stop cueing and coaching and focusing on like each part of our body so much. This is what I think coaches and therapists miss this part, because often we're heavy on, okay, can you feel your foot? Can you feel your hip? Can you feel this area of your body? But the best athletes, again, when they increase speed, they can't tell you what they feel anywhere. They are so focused on the task of getting to the ball. And so that is really important. And that can be a really big lesson for people in pain, because I can get you to try and flex your shoulder. I can try and lift your arm up overhead, and you'll say it's my shoulder is sore when I do that motion. Or I can get you to put your hand against the wall in the closed chain, and I can get you to push your chest down towards the floor. You've still actually gone into an overhead position. It's just how you've got there is different. So we can scramble the signal in that way. I can get you also to say, bring your arm up overhead, or I can throw a ball and you have to catch it over your head. That might be two very different outcomes in terms of how your shoulder feels, but it might be a very similar movement. So I think being able to switch between that, external task and being able to focus internally for the right person can be magic.
Yeah. That's so interesting how this differences that seem subtle, like that seems very small, no, but actually in our mind, body, spirit connection to the environment, this is so different, because there's no just mechanical moving the arm. There's always a layer behind it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting back to a strain of our conversation that we didn't finish about so people come probably through your Instagram. There's your online programs. Do you say programs? Do you say courses? How do you call that?
Programs, yeah.
Programs, yeah. There's the online programs, and there's some people that come to your clinic, like depending on availability. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there is more demand than supply on that, and you have some workshops as well. Also, not so many as I see. Yeah, you also do
too much travel
workshops here and there. It looks like
travel wears me down a little bit. So we've been in Australia, Germany, Sweden, Canada for a couple of workshops, London twice already this year, maybe somewhere else as well. I think a couple of other places. So we've been doing at least one workshop every month, and I get sick of airports very quickly. I really like being in the city or the place, but I don't like being in the airport.
Yeah, I know that feeling. Like when this was mainly when I was working with Ido, or before I was working for MoveNut. So yeah, I was also traveling a lot, and now I'm traveling much less. I'm also traveling, but then it was like every other weekend, and that was quite intense. So yeah, it was intense to a point also where my son yesterday, he asked me if I have been in Belfast. He's very much into the Titanic at the moment, and the Titanic has been built in Belfast. And my mother was standing next to me, actually, and I was saying, I don't know. I've been to Ireland, but I don't know if I've been to Belfast or if I've been to Dublin.
Yeah.
But because we had a workshop there, but it starts to become a bit blurry because you sort of go in and out, you know? Like it's still nice to have seen all these places But as yeah, at least we didn't do it that we stayed, because we had always Berlin as the base and came back. And now I would do it similar or I'm doing it similar because of my kids. I don't want to stay too long away from them. Well, it was an interesting moment where I realized, wow, okay, usually I know, but it's also because of the situation in Ireland, because there's two capitals, like of North Ireland and of Ireland, and that was confusing me a little bit, but it showed me, okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why my wife Kira organizes all of our workshops, and I literally don't know most of the time. I don't know the name of the gym. I don't know whereabouts it is. She just gets me there, and then I start talking, and that's so. Yeah, I can't even remember where I was like last month. Never mind a few years ago.
If people are coming to you, they want to solve a problem, compared to now, because to my podcast, there's lots of coaches are listening to it, also physiotherapists. Do they have a different entry point, or they would both start with buying one of your online programs?
I honestly think that's the best place to begin, because it gives people a chance to dip a toe in, and it's very practical to begin with. And I like people to start with practical, and then like we have a membership site at the moment where it's almost like a Netflix of just movement. So you can just go on and choose a body part or some kind of topic, and there'll be loads of different like 5, 10, 15-minute videos where I break down. I might show you a client and stuff like this. And I think there's about 800 coaches and therapists in there that study every month with us there. It's just a monthly subscription. And I would say 95% of them have started with buying a program first, just to get a feel of it and try a few things. And it's not a huge commitment. The programs might be like 20 minutes a day or 3 or 4 days a week or something like that. So yeah, most people start with either the lower body basics one or the foot one. And the good thing they weren't actually written for coaches and therapists. They were just written for people to do. But yeah, they end up coaches and therapists, especially the new foot one now. It kind of has 4 phases where it breaks down. Okay, here's the foot. We're gonna, in phase 1, we're gonna start to map out the rear foot, the midfoot, and the forefoot, get you really sensing each area, opening the joints, particularly in the midfoot, and just build not tiny, but just do 1 or 2 exercises to build a little bit of strength in the soleus and learning to push through the foot. Phase 2, there's like starting to build a little bit more strength there, strengthen the forefoot a bit more and the calf a bit more. Phase 3 is like connecting. So when we push through the foot, here's what we want the knee to be able to do. And here's how we should get hip extension when we push through this part of the foot. And that's kind of connecting the whole lower limb together. And phase 4 then is plyometrics. So we start to bring people through different jumping exercises and learning to leave the ground and come back to the ground again. And that's written for people with plantar fascia, Achilles issues, shin splints, ankle issues, all this stuff. But a lot of the coaches and therapists, a lot of people that are buying it are coaches and therapists because they get to see exactly how I write a program and just say, okay, we start with this, we do, then move on to this, and this. And then they get to do it and they feel, oh, this gives me so many little options to use with my clients. Because most people that have foot problems, they just do 2 things. They go into physio and they get given calf raises and towel-like scrunches, or toe lifts or something like this. And those exercises are fine, but there's a lot more to the foot and the lower leg than just calf raises and towel scrunches. Or the other option is they don't get given any exercise and they're just put in an orthotic straight away. So yeah, it just gives people options. And then for the people who want to dive deeper, they come to a workshop then, or they jump on our membership site, or hopefully a bit of both.
And this membership site, I looked on your website, is called DGR Interactive. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It.
Cool.
Exactly.
Is there a certain age bracket for your courses? Like, can you be too old for them or too young? No. You just have to want to move, and we have kind of regressions and progressions, and you can't do this on a single leg, so you start on a double leg. And no,
that's been one of the coolest things for us to see, and I've learned a lot from that. And I think a lot of coaches have learned a lot, is that because we'll have Olympians and professional athletes, like professional NBA players, earning millions and millions of dollars a year, and they'll buy a €50 program, and they'll get better results with that program than they have done in years of therapy from their physio in the NBA. But then there could be a 50-year-old person, 60-year-old, 70-year-old could be doing the same program, and they will get huge benefits as well. The only difference is the professional athlete usually learns things much quicker. They just are skill development machines. They just pick up skills so incredibly quickly. So they will just progress a bit quicker. That's the only difference. But that's why I think we all have the same shape of body pretty much. We all have the same shape of joints at least. Yeah, some are taller, some are smaller, there's slightly different structures, but everyone still has a femur, everyone still has a hip that hopefully can move in these directions. So that's how I look at it. And I challenge people, but I ask them to start at their level and just progress as they feel like they can.
Nice, David. It really sounds like something a huge bunch of people should check out, and so many people have some sort of problem, so probably they can relate. I see, especially as things for the foot, but also for all the other, like upper body, lower body, core areas. So they will find your work at davidgrayrehab.com. And as I said already, your Instagram is also maybe the best place to first get to know, okay, what sort of work, what sort of exercises could wait for me in such program.
Exactly. Because people might listen and they might say, this guy sounds good, and then they might go on my Instagram and see my head and hate me immediately when they see my face. So that there's a chance that will happen. And I want to go back to what you said about the neck, because there's one thing that I have one vivid memory of being at that Edo workshop, and we were doing, I can't remember what it's called, but it's you have a finger on either side, or a finger and a thumb, and you're trying to move your head. Glides, I actually can't do it. The glides side to side, and I probably still can't do it. But you were explaining it, you showed it, and then you said, like, try to be pretty strict with it when you're practicing on your own, or something like this. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but something like this, like try and actually do the motion. Don't spice it up too much, or something like this. And you were walking around the room, and I have a vivid memory of, I must have been like moving my neck half an inch, because you came over and you were like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm trying to do it, and I don't want to spice it up too much. And you said, well, you need to spice it up a little bit at least. So yeah, so that I have a very vivid memory of that.
I have to say that I was a little bit more spicy like back then, and how I was speaking to people, I turned it down a little bit. I became a little bit nicer, but I'm happy it stayed in your mind as a funny thing, let's say.
yeah. I in Ireland, I'm well used to people being like pretty blunt, so that was like that's how I like to be coached. Just tell me what it is and I'll go. So that was good. That was really good.
Nice, David. Thank you for the conversation. That was very interesting. It was very interesting for me to dive a little bit deeper into it, and also figure out a bit more the depth of the work and where it comes from. And I'm definitely how do you say, I'm excited. Like it sounds very, very nice, and I will look into your programs. So you definitely sold one more program in this.
Well, I'm gonna check out your program as well, definitely, because do you use much of have you seen much of the FRC work?
I haven't done it myself, but people also tell me regular, oh yeah, this is a bit similar.
Yeah. So they have placed a big emphasis on joint articulations. what do they call it? CARs, controlled articular rotations, and moving all your joints in every direction or most directions. But I really like the idea, but they place a massive emphasis on well, at least this is how it's kind of people will end up performing it this way, is creating as much tension as possible. So irradiation is a concept, like squeezing as hard as you can to get 1 more millimeter out of the joint. And I am not a big fan. I think that can be beneficial in certain cases, but it's not that I want always 1 more millimeter out of the joint. I want to be able to move the joint without needing to squeeze as hard as possible all of the time. So
Yeah.
I really like the idea of moving all our joints. I learned that from some Avito stuff. Obviously, you've been working on it. Some FRC stuff, Chinese martial arts. There's a very common theme of just being able to move your joints around and feeling good. But then I would fall more on the side of exploring with less tension rather than more all of the time.
Yeah, yeah, I feel related to this. That's why I also call it soft range of motion practice, because it might start with tension here and there, and you might feel your muscles working, but in the end, the idea is that you have a soft body.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Excellent.
Cool.
Excellent.
Thank you,
Joseph,
David.
thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Really enjoyed the chat, and keep up the great work.